couple of days ago, I did a video poo-pooing the two names that had been leaked, to be fair, from club sources, as possibilities for West Ham's next manager. Now, there have been two more leaks today, one of them good and one of them bad. Now, when I was talking about the two earlier on in the week, they were Christophe Galtier. I don't want to spend any more time going into that. I think I've obviously made my case for reasons why we wouldn't want to go and get this guy, why it's a risky appointment. And the other one was Paulo Fonseca. Now, if you watched the video, you remember I said, look, Paulo Fonseca is a managerial journeyman. He doesn't spend much time at any particular club. His record has been boosted by his time at Shakhtar, and everyone wins the league at Shakhtar. If you took over Shakhtar, you win the league, right? It's maybe slightly insulting, but I certainly don't mean it to be. But my point, the entirety of my point, was that I think as a sort of one of the top 15 richest clubs in world football, was the second biggest stadium in the Premier League, West Ham should be going for... if not, I'm not talking about Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp. I'm not deluded. I know we can't get them, but maybe the best up-and-coming manager, or certainly a very, very high-level manager. And during it, I said, look, Fonseca's not even the best Portuguese manager out there that we could possibly go and get. And I mentioned that bloke at Sporting Lisbon. Now, his name is Ruben Amorim, and I was really pleased this morning that he was one of the two names that was mentioned as a possible replacement for David Moyes. Now, he's the one I'm pleased about, by the way. The one I'm not pleased about is Thomas Tuchel. We'll get back to that in a second. I think I want to make the point as well that I realise we're talking about David Moyes' job like he's not here. He very much is here, but we'll deal with that. I'll produce a video tomorrow morning about because he's got more to do with the Nottingham Forest game. Look, David Moyes wins against Nottingham Forest, and I do think the perception from the club, and I'm talking about the board, will pretty much change. And I think Fabrizio Romano said it best yesterday in his tweet when he said, the managerial situation at the club is fluid. And yeah, I mean, it's an interesting choice of word, but the right choice of word as well. And it basically, fluid could mean indecision. I think they're biding their time. I think they're kicking a can down the road. I would rather it be fluid, by the way, than them doing what it looked like they were going to do 2 or 3 weeks ago, which is offer David Moyes a contract irrespective. But I think whilst that might be the best thing for the club, I'm not sure the indecision is the best thing for David Moyes. I don't think that particularly helps David Moyes. I certainly don't believe it helps Tim Stuyton. And in terms of players who might be thinking, I want to get out of here, then perhaps the fluid situation is not the best. I spoke to Ian Bishop yesterday we did a little Q&A over on Patreon, and I was talking to him and saying, what happens at half-time? What happens with the players? Are the players not being demonstrative? Are the players not saying to David Moyes, look, your tactics are not working? And Bish made the very, very good point is, look, in my day, we would have shouted it out in the dressing room, and he gave a couple of examples of how he'd done that himself. He said, in these days, players are just on the phone to their agents saying, get me out of here. And we've seen a little bit of that over the recent days. I think the nice bit of good news we all had yesterday, was that I think it was Mohamed Kudus. I don't know where this had come from. I think it was someone like Football Insider. Mohamed Kudus had said, I'm going nowhere. I'm certainly not asking for a transfer. That's great. We could have done with some of the good news. But my point is, when nobody knows who the manager's going to be next season, it's very, very hard for anybody to sort of get behind what may or may not be happening at the club. The Thomas Tuchel one is a concern. All right, that is a concern because it appears to be more of the same. Tuchel, look, Bayern Munich have won the Premier League, the Bundesliga, for the last 11 seasons. They might not win it this season. Now, don't get me wrong, I think part of that could well be down to Xabi Alonso's brilliance, but some of it is down to the fact that maybe Thomas Tuchel's not doing great. And I think his last 4 high-profile appointments have not been amazing. And there's a touch of Rafa Benitez-itis about this. And what I mean by that is, West Ham seemed, and I think particularly it's fair to say David Sullivan, seemed to be totally fixated on Rafa Benitez long after he'd passed his sell-by date. And I do worry that there's an antiquated way of viewing football from our board, in as much as we don't know who the best, the biggest and the brightest and the best up-and-coming, not just football stars are maybe, but in terms of managerial coaches that are coming up, and maybe the brightest young ones, and we seem to revert back to the old, the tried and the tested. And in as much as you don't need to have a intrinsic knowledge of young coaches in Europe to know about Thomas Tuchel. He's a high-profile coach, but I think it'd be argued he didn't do particularly well at Chelsea. It'd certainly be argued he's not doing particularly well at Bayern Munich. And I think you could, well, I mean, look, it's not just in the Bundesliga, by the way. I think they got knocked out of the cup early, didn't they, if I remember rightly? And then they certainly, I think they got a bit of they got an unfavourable result in the Champions League, possibly to Lazio. I might have that wrong. This week was Lazio or Napoli. And he's not doing particularly well. He's certainly not doing that well. And I just wonder if we focus too much on players that are names, coaches that are too long established, which is why I was really pleased to hear about Ruben Amorim, because Amorim is every inch the up-and-coming coach. What he's done at Sporting Lisbon is nothing short of remarkable. I think it's easy when you look at Portuguese football to look at them as a big three, a top three. You look at Benfica, you look at Porto, you look at Sporting Lisbon. You think, well, always one of those three wins the title. But realistically, it has been more of a big two. At Sporting, up until Amorim got appointed, Sporting hadn't won the title for 19 years, so that was a really big deal. He's an incredible coach, only 39 years of age. And I think it says a lot about Portuguese football, a lot about Sporting Lisbon as well, that Sporting spotted a very, very good coach who was doing big things at Braga, and they spent 15 million euros on his release clause. Now, this is something I think West Ham are going to need to get their head around. I am in little doubt that the reason we were looking at Fonseca, I think it was twofold. I think, number one, Fonseca is known to an agent that's close to David Sullivan. And I think, number two, he's cheap. He's out of contract at Lille in the summer. So, and I think for a long, long time, West Ham have looked at managers who are cheap. How many times have you heard that we're only looking at managers who are out of contract? It's certainly, even look at Aston Villa. I think Aston Villa, the way they were really decisive in how they dealt with what happened after Steven Gerrard. They decided Steven Gerrard was surplus to requirements. But they're really proactive. West Ham board don't act like that. And the thing is with Amorim is he did have a buyout clause. And I think still to this day, he is what Sporting Lisbon paid Braga is sort of like either the second or third biggest compensation ever paid for a manager. I think you've got to pay compensation for a really good manager if you want to get him out of his contract. And he does have a long contract. But this guy is absolutely brilliant. He integrates experience and youth incredibly well. I mean, my word, he hadn't even bought... this is a young Portuguese manager. When I bought a player from a championship last year, and he's actually banging the goals in Portugal at the moment. He brings through youth players, and so many of the players that were pivotal in that championship winning side that he put together are now playing for some of the best clubs across Europe. His team have been absolutely decimated, yet it appears to have little or no impact, because I think possibly they're second at the moment, but they've got the game in hand, and they look like... I think most experts in Portugal think that Sporting are going to win the league again this season. It's incredible how much that team has been decimated. I think this is exactly the type of guy we should be going for. He is the young, and arguably, certainly one of the top 3 or 4 young, brightest coaches in European football. And I was delighted to see us linked with him. Tuchel was just more lazy, just more of the lazy stuff. And I'm getting a little bit concerned about the way West Ham are doing it. Look, West Ham have a really big opportunity here. There's a lot of doom and gloom at the moment, and there's a lot of things to be concerned about with West Ham, and I'm concerned about a lot of them. But sometimes there's opportunity, and I believe there's opportunity now. I really do. And particularly if we're going to have a clean slate, and I think we are, then you have an opportunity. You take to Tim Steiter now. Look, mate, we're going to let you run all footballing things. Go and get one of the top coaches in Europe. Maybe go and get this Amorim, and then go and put together a squad. Reduce the age profile of the squad, and I think there's opportunity there. I think the rumour that I heard this morning that maybe Tim Steiter had earmarked and highlighted Thomas Tuchel, I don't believe it. It doesn't fit. I just don't think it fits at all. I think he would have. I think he would have his sights set, and he would have I would hope, a dossier of just more enterprising names than that, of more coaches with more promise than just sort of the stale, tired old names that you see. Look, Tuchel is a good coach and he's a well-established coach. But I don't think it would be opportunity. I think it would be a relatively safe pair of hands. But whilst I think that we'd probably have to pay big money to get Ruben Amorim out of his contract, I think you'd probably pay him less as a weekly wage and you'd pay someone like Thomas Tuchel. So I'm not sure this is the right thing to be doing. I am pleased. I am pleased to see us linked with other names than the two I mentioned the other day. I really am. I'm pleased to see us not linked with Graham Potter, for instance. Look, I'm not entirely sure whether Graham Potter would be a great fit for West Ham. I'm really not. But again, he's somebody that's failed at his last job. Now, I am also aware that many people have failed at Chelsea, and it probably says a lot more about Chelsea than it does about the coaches being in there. But I still think it's a risk. Any managerial appointment is a risk. But I'd much rather select a manager who's on the way up, who's got an upward trajectory rather than a downward trajectory. And in the case of Amorim, I think you're dealing with one of the brightest young coaches in European football, and I just think it's just something West Ham should be looking to do. Anyway, as I said, thanks for so much for all the wonderful interactions over the past 2 or 3 days. It's such a shame that West Ham is like this at the moment, and as I say, we'll deal with Nottingham Forest tomorrow in tomorrow's video and what David Moyes has got to do. If I could just point you in the direction of basically the video sponsor today, which is Match Bingo. There's a free-to-play game on Match Bingo. The link is in the description below. You'd be doing us a massive favour by downloading it. There's free-to-play games. Also, they've got a betting limit of £2 per game, so you can't run up loads and loads of betting debts, which is really, really good. By the way, it takes all the fuss out of betting, basically. They give you a bingo card, and on the bingo card, it's basically what minutes that there might have been corners, throw-ins, cards, goals, that type of thing. We've already had 2 winners from Hammer Chat subscribers already thus far. We think it's a good game. If you don't like it, you can just uninstall it. You don't have to pay. You don't have to play the pay-to-play games. You can just play the freebie games if you want to. At least one Premier League match each game week is free. Check it out. The link is in the description below. That's Match Bingo. I've got to say, what a lovely bunch of people they are to work with as well. As ever, thanks so much for watching the video. Hopefully we can... It's weird, isn't it? You know, it's weird watching social media at the moment, actually, because, you know, people are frustrated with West Ham. You know, they really are. And I don't spend a lot of time on social. I spent 5 minutes on there today and wish that I hadn't. Let me put it that way. But, you know, it's tough. I think it's really, really tough. And I think there's people on there who don't know what to think, don't know what to believe. There's some people wanting us to lose against Nottingham Forest so as we can get rid of David Moyes. I think my view on that, I know I'm sort of morphing into talking about Nottingham Forest now, my view on that is I don't think it would. I think we'd just end up losing the game. We'd just be, you know, sort of 3 points worse off. You know, I don't think a loss would mean that David Moyes goes. I think there's indecision at the top, as I've mentioned on, you know, probably my last few videos. I'm very much looking at the ownership because I think we're all looking for a bit of leadership at the moment, aren't we? And don't seem to be getting any. Hopefully we get the win. I certainly obviously want to get the win. Not hopeful. I'll deal with that in tomorrow's video. Thanks for watching. Catch up with you in the morning.